All right, you're listening to the We've All Been There podcast. My name is Maximiliano Striplin, and I get to be one of the pastors here at Lifegate Church. And I'm joined with my fearless leader, my pastor, Pastor Chad Benson. How you doing, Pastor?
I'm good, man. How are you, Pastor Max?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. Good to be
had
back.
a busy season. You just came. You had camp.
Ooh.
You had missions trip.
All the things.
Summertime, man. It's good.
Yeah, it's going to pick right back up, though. School year's coming. So.
It's coming. It's just right around the corner. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's good season, good time for ministry. And we're thankful for everybody that's been watching us and listening to us and joining us for the We've All Been There podcast. You know, our heart really is just to talk about stuff that all of us probably experience in life. We're, mostly focused on leaders and pastors and things like that. But I think it's just, if you're going to be We've All Been There, it ought to be for everybody. Just everything that we all go through at times. Some of them are the good things. Some of them are the low spots. And we know, Lord, that, there's a lot of times that, you listen to a podcast or something like that, and people are cut and dry on things. We know it's not cut and dry. There's the middle ground, and that's kind of where we want to land in this podcast and hopefully be helpful. So, the last couple of times, I think last time we were a lot more practical, and we talked about we've all been lazy. And we talked about those moments when we've when we haven't worked hard and things like that. Hopefully that was helpful to people. Today, we're going to talk about something maybe a little bit more emotional, and we don't want to be a downer, but we are going to talk about loneliness. I think that a lot of us face times when we're lonely, and I think ministry's lonely. Life can be lonely at times. And so we want to talk about that a little bit, but to keep it from really being a downer, let's just start with kind of something fun. I was thinking about this when we were prepping for the podcast. I remember when I was in about the 6th grade, there was this girl that I liked.
Oh no.
And she, we were dating. However you date in the 6th grade, I have no idea. We're going out. We weren't going anywhere, but we were going out. And anyway, she decided to break up with me, and I was so sad. I think it was coming back from camp, if I remember right. We were in the bus on the way back from camp, and she had broken up with me, and I was just not God's plan for her life, I guess, in the 6th grade.
Oh, man. Did she hit you with the it's not me, it's God?
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
No.
It was something like that. And I was so sad, and I was so lonely. And back in those days, there was this female artist. Her name was Tiffany. I don't know if anybody remembers Tiffany.
Here we go, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
it's
concert.
from the 80s. Yeah, and she had this song. It was, could have been so beautiful. And I remember listening to that song on my Sony Walkman in the bus on the way back from camp. And I was so sad and so lonely. Yeah, there you go. What about you? You had any times when you felt lonely that were, give us something humorous or something like that.
I would say for me, the most lonely I felt was probably every Valentine's Day, because I just remember all my friends would have dates or girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever, and I just wouldn't have anyone to go out with. And listen, it's not because I didn't try, okay? I definitely shot my shot and just never worked out. And so I just remember the next day after Valentine's Day, I'd go back to school and all my friends talk about how awesome their dates were and how fun it was and all that stuff. And I'm just like, man, that's brutal.
You tried.
So I would say that's probably when I felt the loneliness. That's definitely when I felt my most alone, listening to my, sad music in my house.
Well, who would that have been?
Reliant K, probably. Probably something sad by Reliant K. So
that's funny. Well, we are making light a little bit because it is a subject there's humor in it, but it's also real. And I think we've probably all felt that way, or just felt like we didn't have someone. And it could be when you were a kid and you didn't have that date on a Friday night or something. But it also could be, you go to a new church and you walk in and you don't know anybody, or you're someone new in town, or you have a new job, or just all those moments that I think that we feel that issue of loneliness, and nobody's a stranger to it. And I think sometimes even the older that we get, it's something that we deal with more, even because you can even have a great family and great people that love you, great people around you, but still experience those moments, those times when you feel lonely, those times of loneliness. And I know, Max, you had a few interesting things that you came across about loneliness, and I wanted you to share those because they're actually pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, Pastor, I was shocked to find some things out about loneliness that I didn't know. We often think that loneliness is something that just affects our mental health, but it's also something that affects our body. It affects different parts of us. And so, what I learned is that loneliness is as bad for us as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Because we were designed to be together, we have something in our body that sets off alarms that cause our blood pressure to rise, cause our cortisol to go up, makes our heart rate go up, and makes us go into a type of fight or flight mentality. And if those alarms keep going off for such a long time, and we live in that loneliness for weeks and months, it can cause even premature death. It can cause by way of increased rates of strokes and heart attacks, and even a 64% increase rate of dementia. Based on a study done a couple of years ago, 1 in 5 millennials said they did not have a single friend, which is crazy because I was under the impression that only older people are the loneliest, but loneliness is a big problem in young people today. And the last thing I had is at any moment, half of Americans are experiencing measurable levels of loneliness, and that is more than diabetes or even smoking. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you think about kind of some of the things that we've been experiencing in the world and what people are going through, what we went through with the pandemic. We think about, we'll talk more about the reasons for loneliness later, but it makes sense. And yet at the same time, it's really heartbreaking. It's really sad to think. And I know I experienced times of loneliness too, but to think about 1 in 5 millennials that say they don't have a single friend. Yeah, it's pretty rough.
I think it's just so crazy. And this is something I mentioned before in the huddle that we do on Sunday mornings. It's this fact that this is something that is more prevalent in males. Guys are more unlikely to have friends.
For sure, and I think guys are less likely to open themselves up or to reach out to someone and try to connect with someone, and guys are less likely to share when they feel a feeling of loneliness, and so definitely, yeah, that's right. We got it all together. Yeah. So how do you identify if you're one of those that's going, man, I'm really struggling with loneliness? What are going to be some of the things that you're gonna experience or you're gonna see in your life that kind of identify that feeling?
Yeah. So a few ways to identify if you or someone else is suffering from loneliness is: do you feel disconnected from family or work or community? Do you feel invisible? Do you feel uncared for? Or do any things that we just talked about that we threw out feel familiar? Does it feel like those things align with you? Do you have some other ways, Pastor?
I was thinking about it. You gave me those, and I thought, what are some of the ways that I know that I'm experiencing loneliness? One is, and these are more probably specific, but when I have something funny or something good that happens, and I'm trying to think, I want to share that with somebody, and then I don't have anybody to share it with. I mean, this sounds silly, but you can be scrolling through Instagram and see a funny reel, and think, I just want to share that with someone, and then be like, I don't have anybody to share that with. Or I like golf and sports and things, and so something can happen in the sports world, and you want to pick up your phone and text somebody, oh, did you see that? And then you're like, I don't have anybody that would relate to that or anybody that I would text that to. Sometimes when you're going through a difficult season and you need somebody to pray with you or somebody to just listen, and you look at your phone and you go, I don't know who. And one of the things I was thinking about this morning on this is, especially in the life of a leader, that leadership itself just lends itself to loneliness. And I was trying to think, why is that? And I think it is because you have friends that you're also their leader. And so you have those moments when it's like, of course I know you're my friend, Max, or of course I know someone else on staff or someone who goes to church here is my friend, and we have that type of relationship. But at the same time, I'm also their boss. Or I'm also their leader, or I'm also their pastor, or I'm also their presbyter. And so the more you grow in leadership, the more you get to that place where you're like, there's hardly anybody in my life that I'm not leading them in some way. And so as connected as I feel to them, as much of a relationship or a friendship as I have, there's also that other level that I'm their boss, or I'm their leader, or I'm their pastor, I'm their presbyter, I'm whatever. And that's always just a little bit of attention. Right. And I know that I've had times when there were people on staff that I wanted to be closer to. I wouldn't say that's in our staff right now, but at certain times in our staff where I wanted to be close to someone, and they always they would not get quite as close as I'd like to be. And I kind of realized, I think it's because I'm their boss, And they love me and they like me, but nobody wants their boss being around all the time when they're not at work. Does that make sense? And so that's, I think, a level of loneliness sometimes. And the more you grow in leadership, the more responsibility that you have, the more that the people that you're surrounded by are people that, yes, are your friends, and yes, you love them, but yes, in some way you're leading them. And so that can cause there to be some stress and strain when it comes to loneliness, for sure.
Yeah, I've heard the saying, it's lonely at the top, which never really sat right with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's some truth to that.
Sure, I'd rather be at the top than at the bottom. It's lonely at the bottom too,
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm at the top. I'm just saying I would rather have more responsibility, more leadership, and thankful for the blessing of that. But there is a side of it that comes with it that is, you are always going to have that little bit of thing with those people that you lead. So
okay, this is the last crazy thing that I found out as I was studying.
This is good. This blew my mind.
Did you know that you can rent a friend in Manhattan, New York? You can rent a friend, and it really feels like they are your friend. Like they will actually spend time with you and enjoy things that you would enjoy. And there's this person who wrote this book that basically talks about that, them renting a friend for the whole day. What's crazier than that, though, is that in Japan, you can rent a whole family. That's wild, that you can rent a whole family. People would much rather pay for someone to be their friend than they would actually just text or call or ask someone to hang out. And it leads me to this thought that we're in the middle of a loneliness epidemic.
I agree. Well, at first I was just going to say, I'll be your friend for free. I'll be anybody that's listening or watching.
I'll be your friend for lunch.
Oh, that too. Yeah, you can take me to lunch if you want, or I'll take you to lunch. No, that's just crazy. And I think you are right that there is a loneliness epidemic. And I think that there's so many people that are struggling with that out there. I think there are a few things that kind of lead to it. I put that in our content for this week, and then or for this month, and then we'll jump into what are some things we can do when we experience loneliness. But I think there are a few things that kind of lend itself or lead itself towards loneliness and that are in our culture today. I mean, one is just that we live in a culture that's all about independence, especially if you're an American. If you live in America, we celebrate it. We have a day called Independence Day. We celebrate this idea, and I know what Independence Day is, but it's also the idea of individualism and the idea of this is who we are as Americans, that we're independent and we're free and we can do our thing. And even as parents, we desire to raise our children to be independent and to be on their own. We talk about it at church. Even some of the language we use at church, we talk about things like having a personal relationship with Jesus. And yes, we should have a personal relationship with Jesus. That's very true, but it's an incomplete thing, because we weren't just called to just have a relationship one-on-one with Jesus, but we're called to have a communal, a relationship within a fellowship, within family. And so we weren't made by God for independence. We were actually made for interdependence. So we'd be dependent upon one another. But the American culture really kind of pushes this idea of independence. Another one that I put down here is that there's this increased mobility.
Yeah.
In other words, people move all the time. In previous generations, people would live in the same town, maybe even the same house or the same neighborhood for their entire life. But more and more these days, Americans, they're moving all the time. They're moving every 5 years. And, I think about some of the people that we've met that have come to be part of the church here in the last couple of years. Used to, it would be someone moved from another town in Texas. Yep. Now we're having people that are moving from Minnesota and
Mm-hmm.
Arizona and California. And they're moving clear across the country, completely away from their community that they had before. And it didn't used to move that much. When I was a kid, my parents moved around a lot, but I always found them. So. But the bottom line really is like it's really hard to. There's a dad joke.
I know.
Right
I was
there.
like,
Yeah.
I was like, guys, that was good.
But the bottom line is it's hard to build lasting relationships if you're moving every 3 years.
Yeah.
How are you gonna build long-term connections? So that's another one. Another one is just there's so much more online activity. So many things that are not done in person anymore. And I know we're going to talk about social media here in a little bit, so I'll save that for then.
Yeah.
But it's not just social media. I mean, it's online shopping, and it's Zoom working from home, and all this stuff. And then you add on top of that social media and Facebook and Twitter and all the things that make you feel like you're missing out.
Yeah.
And that's a huge one. In fact, you had a couple things on social media.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that social media has done such a great job to connect people and for us to experience more of the world. But in the midst of that, we've seen people become even more disconnected. And what I know about the past is that in my dad's generation, smoking, cigarettes, tobacco was like the big thing, right? That was the vice. That was the thing that had so many people entangled. And for our generation, what's become the tobacco business of our day is social media. And it's just something that we've become addicted to, something that we've been struggling with. We've replaced community with convenience. We want things easy. We want things more accessible. We don't want to work as much. We want to just be able to do things from the comfort of our home. There's this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Yeah, it's probably going to be easier to do things on your own. But if you want to go far, you want to do it together.
It's definitely lonelier. It's interesting. As you were saying that, I was thinking it's interesting how we get addicted to things that kill us. Because tobacco was killing people, but people were still putting it in their body, nicotine, things like that, and we're doing the same thing. And I'm guilty too. I get on social media, and you can get addicted to those little
quick fix.
little hits of dopamine, and you feel like it's making me feel connected, but in a lot of ways it can actually make you feel less connected. And then again, not just that, but all the other stuff that the modern conveniences. If you go way back, before the air conditioner, where did everybody sit in the evening? Well, they sat out on the front porch because it was so hot, inside. And so they'd sit there where there's a breeze in the evening. And what would they do? They'd meet their neighbors. And we invented air conditioning. And so now we all sit inside, or we go to the back porch where the pool is and there's a fence and whatever. We got garage door openers where before you had to get out, open your garage door, you might have to say hi to your neighbor. Now you just push a button, you drive in and close the door and don't have to say hi to anybody.
Yeah.
You go to the grocery store and buy your groceries and get to see somebody there. Now you just click some buttons online and they'll even deliver it to your house. I saw one thing where they're like a commercial not a while back where Walmart would bring it in and put it away for you. I'm like, well, there's a good way to meet somebody. Maybe they're inside your house putting your stuff away. That's kind of creepy. I don't know, but
that's a lot.
We're working from home, all this stuff.
Yeah,
those modern conveniences and all the online stuff. Then we got more crowded schedules. That was another thing. We're just much more busy than we used to be, and so we got the kids' activities. We got home responsibilities, and you got to do school, and you got to do the sports league, and you got to mow the yard, and you got to wash the clothes, and you got to pay the bills, you got to make the dinner, you just got to do all the stuff, and our schedules are so filled with all of these things that we're busy running around. We don't have time to really connect with people. And then the last one I thought is the risk of being hurt.
Yeah, so good.
And a lot of times we would rather be lonely than actually risk being hurt by someone. And I wrote this down, but I thought it's so powerful. The more we are hurt, the more we start to see people as a source of pain. And when you think about that, like if you really see other people as a source of pain of somebody that's got something or someone that's going to hurt you, then what are you going to be? You're going to be more closed off. You're going to be more guarded. You don't want to be hurt again. And so we trade, we're willing to live with the pain of loneliness so that we don't have to live with the pain of being hurt. And it just causes us, though, so many times to miss out on relationships that God has given to us, the way he created us to live. So
you're lonely by choice at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You're choosing to be lonely as opposed to just feeling that loneliness. Okay, should we get a little practical here?
Yeah, come on, give us some good practical ways to combat loneliness. If you're feeling lonely, what are some things you can do?
Yeah, so here's some practical ways to combat loneliness. Talk to strangers. This is double-sided. I talked to Pastor Josh, the worship pastor here, and he was telling me about his daughter, Ella, who would go to a park, or maybe it was some type of experience, and when they came back from the trip, she had like so many new friends. When you're a kid, it's just so easy for you to make friends. That's just something that happens.
I don't even know your name. Easton will go play like that or something, and I'm like, "You made some friends? Yeah, what's their names? I don't know." He just he just played with them. But he had a great time. Yeah.
Something that I like to do is I'll go to a grocery store, or I'll go to a coffee shop, or I'll go just anywhere. I'll just look for opportunities to talk to people. It's good for me, and it's also good for them because it shows that I see them and they get a chance to talk as well.
Sometimes I get the blank stares, though, especially because I'm getting more like my dad all the time. So my talking to someone at the grocery store or whatever is usually some corny dad joke or something, and sometimes they'll just give me the stare, but that's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Second thing of all is impulse texting. Obviously, be careful and make sure you do this in a healthy way. Don't text the wrong people. But I just think when you see something on social media, you see someone do something awesome or something went well or they accomplished something, shoot them a text. Share something that you saw on social media and just celebrate them. Just encourage them. And when you do, it just opens up a conversation. It allows for even just if it's thank you, awesome. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe they get to say, man, it's so good hearing from you. Hey, I just want to celebrate you too. And you start a conversation, possibly leads to hanging out with that person.
He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. That's what Proverbs talks about. That I was just thinking just now that happened with me recently. It wasn't me that did the texting. Just out of the blue, I got a text from a guy. Said, "Man, I really appreciate your leadership and your ministry, and just thinking about you today, or whatever." And I said, "Hey, man, thanks. That was really encouraging to me today. I'd love to get together sometime." So I kind of volleyed it back to him. And he said, well, hey, what about this night? And so we ended up getting our families together, and Easton played with their son, and Amber was there, and we all had dinner. And then from that, just this last week, I said, hey, let's get together again. So I'm having lunch with him here in a couple of weeks. And it all started with just him reaching out, not asking, can we get together for lunch or anything, just saying, I appreciate you and was thinking about you today. And that turned into several connections.
Okay, the next thing we got is we have a responsibility when it comes to our social media. As believers, as friends, as parents, we have to set up some boundaries to be healthy in our social media. Something that I've done is from 9 to 4, Monday through Friday, I cannot get on social media apps. And I haven't given myself the code. I gave Amy the code because I know if I give myself the code, then I'm just going to unlock my own phone.
Well, I have timer on my phone on that, and sometimes it'll get to the end, and I'll just be like, I'll ignore for the day. Yeah. Okay, well, that's the purpose. Exactly.
Even at one point, I took a 2-month break from social media, and I did not feel less connected. I felt more connected. I had to be intentional about actually hanging out with people, and that changed everything. Instead of looking at social media, I would just ask people, hey, what's going on in your life? Instead of looking at social media, I would just ask them, hey, what's going on?
I like that. That's so good. And I think those are just practical ways that you can, if you're lonely, reach out. I think that's okay. I think sometimes we feed our own loneliness by sitting around going, poor me, I'm so lonely, nobody cares. And people do care if we would just take the time to reach out and kind of connect with them. So, man, you had a couple more practical things here about that.
Okay, here are a few more things on how to not be lonely. Number 1, build a table and invite people to it. You got to set a date, set a time, and stick to it. Listen, I don't know how to actually build a table, but whether that's eating out or at home, make sure you give people an environment, a place to hang out just once a month, even.
I think even just, yeah, I think that's the key right there is put it on the calendar. And then when it comes around on the calendar, actually do it.
Okay, number 2 here, be willing to try something different. I have a friend, his name is Zach. He goes to our church, and he invited me to go play pickleball with him. And I thought pickleball was just for old people. I thought it was kind of lame. But once I showed up, I loved it. I loved it. And what was crazy was everyone was so friendly. I met these 2 guys named Ted and Ed, and it was a great form of exercise too. And so ever since then, one, I've been kind of hooked with pickleball, but also I've just enjoyed just being around other people and just getting the chance to talk and hang out with people that I would have never met.
Be willing to try something different. Do something different. I went mountain biking with my daughter and her husband recently, and I enjoyed that. We did that while we were on vacation, and sometimes it's okay to not be good at something.
Yeah.
If it helps you connect with somebody else.
Okay. Number 3, make people a priority. You talked about this earlier about moving because of a job, but we don't really consider people, that our relationships are so important, more than just our jobs or comforts or location, that the people we're surrounded with are super important, and we need to make that a priority.
I think that's important. I do think you're right. Sometimes the company said, we're going to give you this promotion if you move over here. And so we just automatically go, well, that's what I have to do. And we don't think about not just our relationships, but our kids' relationships, our spouse's relationship. I know we were at camp, and one of the ladies that was there with her daughter. And I was just chatting with her about, she's fairly new to the church. And she said, we decided to move here because we were already attending LifeGate, and we could have moved somewhere further away for the job and whatever. We wanted to be here because this was our church, and we had met friends here, and this was our family, and this is where we wanted to be. And I thought, that's someone who's going, I'm not just thinking about the job or the big house, or I'm thinking about the community that I'm going to be involved in, the people.
Yeah, that is so important. We have to prioritize people. I have a friend that we grab lunch every month. We used to do ministry together. He doesn't do ministry anymore. He lives in Fort Worth. He's got a busy job as an executive level web designer. But every month we make it a priority to hang out. We don't always have a date set, but we shift things around to make sure that we hang out. And it's not a matter of benefiting each other in some specific way, but it's just to uplift and encourage each other. I don't necessarily get anything out of it.
Yeah. Here's a thought for you. Things that are important, we make happen. We don't make excuses. And if it's important, if it's really important, then we find a way to make it happen and not just make excuses for why we can't.
Okay. Last thing I got, socialize, don't social media. We're going to make intentional choices about being in person and actually hanging out with people, whether it's a week or a day, putting our social media away.
I like that. Or even if you're going to stick with the social media thing, socialize on social media. Don't just stalk. Actually comment on people's stuff and interact there too. That can be at least a baby step towards relationship with people. When you don't just scroll, but you actually interact with people on there. I've got relationships in my life because of, for a while, I just liked their posts, or I'd comment on something, or just celebrate them on social. And then when I'd see them in person, then you feel already connected. Sometimes even another strategy is use their social media as a way to connect. So it's easy to be able to go, hey, I saw you guys were on vacation. How was that? Yep. And when you see them in person, that's something that is kind of a connecting point or something to talk to them. But, hey, I saw your daughter just got married. How was that? Or how are you doing on that? That kind of a thing.
For sure.
That can cause, instead of just scrolling, mindlessly, like, use that as a way to connect with people. Here's my last thought I got
Come on.
on loneliness and how to deal with it. And so far we've been super practical. I'm gonna get spiritual.
Let's go.
That's what I do.
Bring
I'm a
it, Pastor.
pastor. You ready? What if we decided to turn lonely times into alone times? There's a big difference, I think, between loneliness and aloneness.
Yep.
And I think there are some times when we're alone and we feel lonely, but there are some times when we're feeling lonely that it actually might be an opportunity to turn to a time of aloneness with God. And I think about people who did this in the scripture. I think about, like, Paul. He talked about in 2 Timothy 4:16, he says, at my first defense, nobody came to my support. So I'm going to trial and nobody's there for me, and everyone deserted me. And I imagine he felt super lonely in that moment. I would have. But then he says in the next verse, but the Lord stood by my side and gave me strength. And I think about that. Here's Paul, who's in a moment where he is feeling lonely, but he turned that loneliness towards God, and God was there in the time when people weren't there for him. Or I think about David in Psalm 142 and verse 4. He says, look and see that no one's at my right hand. No one is concerned about me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. And then the next verse he says, but this is what I do. But I cry to the Lord and I say, you are my refuge and you are my portion in the land of the living. I cry and I'm desperate and I'm in need. And so here he is. He's in this place where he's alone and everyone has left him and he's feeling lonely. But he turns that loneliness into an alone time with God. And then most of all, I think about Jesus. Jesus would actually become lonely on purpose. There were times when everyone would be around him and he would go and get alone so that he could be with God. He would intentionally withdraw from the crowds in order to be alone with God. And in Luke 5 verse 16 it says Jesus often withdrew to lonely places where he prayed. And so I know that loneliness is a major issue, and the cure for loneliness so many times is relationships. The Bible talks about in Psalm that God sets the lonely in families. And so you need connection with people. But there are also times, I think, where that loneliness that you're feeling is kind of a signal in your heart that maybe I need to turn in towards God. Maybe I could use this time when I'm feeling alone to call on God and spend time with him and experience his presence. And those lonely moments make them alone time with God.
All right. Well, I think I gotta share some scripture
I think
too.
so.
I gotta put my pastor.
Come on, go. Let's go pastor mode
hat
here.
on. And there's this verse in the Bible. You know what I love about the Bible is that it has a lot to say about loneliness. There's not just one scripture, but there's so many different scriptures about people in the Bible who have felt lonely. And in Isaiah 41:10, it says this. This is Isaiah speaking the word of the Lord. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. In the Bible, the right hand of God is mentioned 132 times. The right hand is described as God's power, his strength, and sovereignty. As a result, the right hand in the Bible is a symbol of power, authority, strength, and protection. Now, the left hand is only mentioned 25 times. And we see God's left hand is often mentioned as holding his judgment or as an advantage in battle, as we see in Judges 3:15-30. God's left hand is more strategic. It's working in the background. It's setting things up, moving pieces we don't even know exist. And I'm left-handed, so I understand this idea of that we live in a right-handed world. And so we don't usually often see left-handed people. And I think we can understand better a right-handed God because most people are right-handed. And so when we see a left-handed God, it doesn't make as much sense. And I think very often we can feel lonely because we don't see God's right hand of power moving in our life. But can I tell you something? And this is what I love about the Bible is that it's not God's right-handed or he's left-handed.
I like that.
God is ambidextrous. That he uses both his hands to move in a powerful way. That when you don't see his right hand
Come on,
moving
man. That's good stuff.
in power and in strength, can I tell you what? He's got a plan and a strategy working on your behalf with his left hand. And when you feel alone, remember that if he's not working in the ways that you can see or understand, you can trust that he's working in the ways you can't see or understand or even imagine. You can trust that God has a plan, and he is powerful, even when you don't see his power at work.
I like that. That's so good. It reminds me of that old preacher quote, but it's still so great that when you can't trace his hand, you can always trust his heart. And sometimes you can't see that right hand working, but you know his left hand is moving and his heart is for good things for us. And so maybe there are people, even I'm just thinking this right now, that are listening or watching that are struggling with that loneliness. Maybe I know for some people, a lot of people, it's because they haven't found that one, that husband or wife, that spouse. And just know that God is working and his timing is good and it's right. And he's bringing those things together for you. Maybe there's others that you're married, but you just don't have that friend or that person. Maybe there are ministers that are out there that some of the loneliness is just the fact that you're carrying the weight on your own, and you're in a church where you don't have a staff or you don't have a team or you don't have people. But God is working in the background. He's preparing those people and he's bringing them in the right time, in the right way. Yeah. And if you'll do your part to reach out and to connect with people and use those opportunities that God brings, and he's doing his part to bring those people in your life. And we're praying for you. We're praying that God would strengthen you and help you, and that you would experience his power and his presence in those times when you're alone, and then he'd bring his people in those right times when you need it. So this is good stuff, man. You got anything else, Pastor Max?
I think that's all I got.
Man, I enjoy doing this every single month, so thank you for doing it with us, and thanks everybody that's joined us month after month. And let your friends know that we're out there. Go ahead and like it and share it and subscribe and just do all the stuff. Leave us a review. That would be helpful, and we can get that out there so that more people can come to know about the We've All Been There podcast. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. We'll see you back next month.